The M1 MacBook Pro has blown away expectations, but it's left people wanting more speed, more RAM, and more storage. So, should you go for the M1 MacBook Pro or wait for the M1X MacBook Pro? Hello everyone, my name's Mike, and here at Tech Moon we uncover tech at home and in video. So hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. So I've compiled a couple of renders of the 14-inch MacBook Pro that I hope you guys like, so drop me a like on this video if you do. But let's talk about this machine. There are some new updates I want to share with you and show you what it might look like and what the performance may look like too. The M1 MacBook Pro is a great laptop, but for some, the limited amount of unified memory and the fact you only get 2 ports is limiting for a lot of users. Even for myself, I find myself wishing for an extra port or 2 for my busy workflow. Plus, even though the graphics performance is the best I've seen in a 13-inch MacBook Pro model, it's still not enough for some of the programs like Blender when you're doing things like animation work. So in these situations, having a 4-port higher performance model makes sense, but the 4-port 13-inch that Apple sells at the moment is slower than the M1 MacBook Pro, but it costs more money. But this is where the M1X chip steps in. Now, this isn't going to be the same body as the current 4-port model like we've seen them do with the M1 chips and then just putting it in the current MacBook Pro body, but this will actually have an all new design. Taking a look at the renders that we did here at Tech Moon, this will have sharp lines and design cues from the iPhone 12 and iPad Air. It will almost be completely flat on all sides, missing the curves to the screen and the bottom that we have got used to for the last 5 years. And because of this, it will mean that from a construction standpoint, it will actually give us more room inside to fit more components, especially in the screen. Having more room potentially means more tech. It's no secret now, especially if you've been subscribed to the channel for a little while, and if you haven't, please go ahead and subscribe right now. Apple has been developing Mini-LED technology to implement for their iPads, and you guessed it, in their Macs too. Mini-LED technology is similar to LCD technology. LCDs have a layer of color pixels and then a backlight behind it so that we can see the colors. However, this has poor contrast and poor blacks because the backlight can either be on or dimmed all the way to off. So if there is a spot in one corner and then a dark spot in another corner, then the backlight can't adjust for that because it can only be on for the whole panel or off for the whole panel or somewhere in between for the whole panel, meaning that the dark spot that should be completely black actually looks a little bit grey. With Mini LED technology, the backlight now has a bunch of LEDs, meaning that LEDs can be controlled independently on different parts of the screen, so that when you're looking at the same situation, the dark spot will now look pretty much black and the bright spot will now be even brighter. We've seen this technology in the XDR Pro display with 576 dimming zones. The MacBook Pro 14-inch will probably have around 200 to 300 local dimming zones, which is around half of the Pro XDR display, but it will be a huge improvement on what we currently have. The Pro XDR has a brightness of 1600 nits, but we won't be seeing this kind of brightness on the Macs. Right now on both the iMac and the MacBook Pros, we see 500 nits of brightness, but with Mini LED, I can assume that this number will probably double, which will pair nicely with Apple's plan to introduce more HDR filming on their iPhones, as you really need a display that can output at least 1000 nits for HDR video and photo editing. Plus, on the XDR Pro display, it has this phenomenal cooling system. That's why it can reach 1600 nits without burning itself or setting itself on fire. The MacBook Pros and iMacs just won't have this kind of cooling, hence why we're going to see a lower nits of brightness. Oh, and also this screen will be 14 inches instead of 13 inches that we currently have, and Apple's plan is to make the bezels smaller around the screen to accommodate for the bigger screen while having the same footprint. Moving on to performance, this is going to be a little bit harder to predict because we don't have 10 years worth of history and data with Apple Silicon like we did with the iPhones and iPad chips to pull from, but let's try to make some educated guesses to the performance plus add a few rumors in with a bunch. So rumors point to this M1X chip having 12 cores instead of the 8 cores that we currently see in the M1, and this M1X chip would be divided into 8 high performance cores, double what we see in the M1, and the same 4 efficiency cores. Now this doesn't mean that we're going to see double the amount of performance in the multi-core, more. But if we take a look at the previous years for iPhone and iPad chips, when Apple doubled the amount of cores in those chips, it actually did mean a doubling of that particular performance. So if we have a look at the M1 multi-core score, that is 7,400. Now we can then assume that on the M1X it will be around 14,200 to 14,800, meaning that the multi-core score performance will be similar to a Mac Pro with its 16-core Xeon processor and actually beating the iMac Pro with its 18-core CPU, which at the moment is $6,500. Yeah, that's right. This little machine will be nearly as fast as that machine, if not faster than an iMac Pro, for basically a fraction of the price. Taking a look at a leak from CPU Monkey, which I'm going to take with a pinch of salt. However, John from Front Page Tech did actually confirm this leak, but they say that this chip will have a base clock of 3.2 gigahertz, which is the same as the M1 chip, which means that the single core score performance will be the same. So there won't be any improvement in basic tasks like opening apps and the general speed of the OS, but this is not a bad thing at all, as the M1 is really fast at that. Now the GPU, which is what I'm more interested in, the new leaks point to a 16-core GPU design for the M1X, meaning double the amount of GPU cores over the M1 Max. So let's put this into something that we can understand. Taking a look at the dedicated graphics cards of the 16-inch MacBook Pro, which Apple currently sells, the 5300M graphics card gets around 24,000 on the GPU metal test on Geekbench, and the 5500M gets around 28,700, with the highest configuration being the 5600M, which gets around 41,000. The M1 8-core GPU gets around 21,800 on that metal test, meaning it's not too far behind from the base MacBook Pro 16-inch. But with this new 16-core M1X, we can expect the metal test to score around 43,500, meaning that this could beat out the highest configurable 16-inch MacBook Pro in a smaller and quieter body. This will be game-changing, as if you wanted a MacBook Pro 16-inch with this level of power inside, it would cost you at least $3,500. But with the M1X MacBook Pro, you could have this power for as little as just under $2,000. And let's not forget, this will also consume far less power. Plus, under my heavy use with the 16-inch MacBook Pro, I only got around 4.5 hours of use, whereas with the M1 Max, I'm easily getting 11 to 12 hours with heavy use. That means less charging, making your batteries last much longer. Now let's move on to the port selection. So as we know, the current high-end 13-inch has 4 Thunderbolt ports, all being USB-C, and a headphone jack, but the rumors are pointing that Apple might be backtracking and adding a HDMI and SD card slot to go along with the 4 USB-C, USB 4 ports. Now I can imagine them bringing back the SD card slot because there hasn't been any changes to manufacturers using USB storage to record to their cameras, and I think SD cards are just here to stay. This will also be most likely a UHS 2 card slot for those faster speeds, because the popularity of UHS 2 cards are getting more and more affordable, and cameras need UHS 2 to record in those higher codec formats. And when it comes to the HDMI port, even though Apple has been pushing USB-C and Thunderbolt monitors, there are still so many monitors that use HDMI, and in the workplace, HDMI monitors still reign king. So having this port make a comeback just makes sense in this situation, especially in a professional setting. Before we get into the rest of the video, I want to thank Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this part of the video. Now more than ever, we are so reliant on our internet, and without a VPN, you can be exposed to online threats like identity theft, ISP tracking, and even price discrimination when you're shopping online. With Surfshark VPN, it protects your information by encrypting all the data that you send through through the internet, keeping anyone unwanted from seeing it. Unlike a lot of VPNs that I've tried before, Surfshark is fast and reliable and can be installed on an unlimited amount of devices. They don't track, monitor, or store anything that you do online, meaning that there's no connection or activity logs. Use the link down in the description below or use promo code TECHMIKE to get 83% off plus 3 extra months for free. Thanks again Surfshark for supporting the channel. The prices will either stay the same at around $1,800 or may increase up to $2,000 depending on how expensive the mini LED technology will be to implement. And Apple being Apple, they will obviously want to keep their healthy margins. We could also see this new M1X 14-inch MacBook Pro come in the next sort of 3 to 4 months. But there we have it. As always, this is a discussion, so please leave a comment down below on what you expect the 14-inch MacBook Pro to look like, and check out the links down in the description to support the channel. Honestly, it really helps me out. If you haven't already, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram at TechCarmoon, drop me a like on this video if you've enjoyed it, and hit that subscribe button if you want to see more. But if you want to see more from me right now, you guys know what to do. I've got fantastic content just lined up for you. 1, 2, click on them right now, you're going to enjoy it. Anyway everyone, look after yourselves and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.